For many years, the nesting population of grey herons has been counted right across the country. That's of interest to biologists and fishermen alike, who in this archive footage seem to be watching each other. The heron uses a dagger-like beak. The man, a fly, sort of, on the end of a line controlled by a rod and reel. And a fine salmon that should be released to help stocks recover because they've declined a lot in Britain. We've changed the sea, and especially rivers, which are our lifeblood. Bit of a shock when you live down there. The heron is an opportunist on its trip away from the nesting colony. Eels are strong and very slippery, which can help. Good luck for the eel, but bad luck for the heron. Back to base. There, in the bare treetops, there's a changeover with the mate. They start nesting sometimes as early as February, and so you can get a glimpse of their private lives. And indeed, we'll follow them right through the year, and from the source of a river that is partly shared between England and Wales. But most of all, we'll use this famous fisherman as our guide to investigate why the River Wye has changed, is changing, and could be changed for its own health, and ours too. So it's past, present and future of the River Wye, and with a rather tongue-in-cheek approach, a wildlife mystery on the threatened River Wye. Did the little Jenny Wren get a surprise from above? If so, it's time for a quick bath and brush up. Wood and water are both key elements in this detective story, which will include a great variety of wildlife, from brimstone butterflies, past celandines here in March, to kingfishers in November, where the river approaches the sea. And our heron guide will take us there, a journey of 155 miles, 250 kilometres. Our second guide, another water expert and traveller, is the rather glamorous looking mallard or wild duck. Except it isn't, when its spring feathers change and the drake loses his good looks. Water and warmth, an encouraging combination. Here comes the sun and the spring, and all that brings with it, or may come with it, humans permitting. Classic signs of spring decorate the river bank and already attract pollinators of all shapes and sizes. That's ivy. Heron, squirrel, pram, trees and wood. The fauna and flora along the River Wye has been modified over many years. Turnturn Abbey is a famous symbol of a changing scene, which continues today with modern tourism, farming and forestry making fences. flat land behind him used to be covered in trees. Now it's grazing for livestock, fenced in, and another clue to our whodunit. Down by the riverside, more signs of spring are being born. These days, locals talk about the water being like pea soup. Or could it be more like poo soup? In the distance is the River Wye, but its source is a long way from here, also grazed by sheep and clad in heather and bracken. Near Plinlimmon, a stream should be clear and clean. It's clear, but not that clean. Yes, plastic gets everywhere, from the deepest ocean to the highest mountains. Is this a crime scene? Tumbling through Royler. The mallard drakes are in perfect early spring plumage, keen to impress an available all-brown female duck. This is called upending, so he's an excellent guide, seeing life below the surface, on the land, and of course from the air. Off he goes, as do the rest of the potential competition. And the winner seems to be this one. Now we have a pair. A jay doesn't miss much from his vantage point in the cherry tree. This area along the Wye is known for its fruit orchards. Nor does the heron, our other guide down the Wye. With his well-camouflaged mate hidden, hopefully out of sight from a nosy jay or even a heron, the drake will have to wait and see. Meanwhile, back in the nesting heron's woodland, there are the first flowers forming a blanket of white and yellow as the aconites, anemones, celandines and primroses push on before the canopy closes in above them and shuts out that essential sunlight. Past evergreens like ivy, which may have sheltered a wintering brimstone butterfly, sometimes out and about at any time of year. So much potential, so much to come if given a chance. And down amongst it, a grey wagtail feeds on tiny flies, and then preens its wagging tail. That water high up not far from the source at Plinlimmon looks okay, but is it? The dreaded weed which can affect the lives of everything here, from tiny midges to fish-chomping otters. You could say that we're all in this, the Wye, together. In the end, us too. His maid awaits, brooding in the veg nearby. But man-made polystyrene, so buoyant, so durable, so dangerous in the wrong place, like here, bubbles included. Not the sort of rubbish to swim through on your very first outing, following your mother, having survived jays and herons. She'll lead them back to water elsewhere, always trying to check on how many she's actually hatched out. Looks like 11. Sadly, most won't survive. But at least they're safely on the water, depending on its condition, which is now becoming a major issue, not just on the Wye but on rivers right across the country. It's mismanagement on a big scale. Thing is, who's responsible and what's the cost of fixing it? It's now late spring on our River Wye journey downstream, a total of 155 miles, 250 kilometres. The J is never far away, always checking. The grass is really green except for this brown patch being investigated by the J. Dried out, it's over a septic tank. There's human poo. This is a better bet amongst the dandelions, taken to the cherry tree for expert attention. Acorns, as with wood pigeons and squirrels, are a vital part of the local woodland. So the link, whether it's jays and acorns or that other opportunistic crow, the magpie, are on the list. But why? And where? A hedge sparrow or dunnock pokes about in what looks like snow, but it isn't. There's almost as short-lived as cherry blossom, which will soon be ripening down by the river. Runoff, catchment, says it all. Fruit farming can be an intensive business involving costly chemicals to keep us customers happy with the produce. Again, water provides a basic clue to all life here. The successful song thrush feeds its chick on who knows what chemically. Farming of all sorts affects the water and the catchment round it. Our white egret heron leads us on downstream from the modern bridge at Hay on Wye to a second much older crossing, a wooden one, witness to much changed circumstance for man and nature, including the increasing effects of the climate crisis. This river will surely be affected as the land is used for crops, cattle and sheep, and one particular food resource, as we'll see. Debris on the bridge is a reminder of floods in the past, with who knows more, or droughts in fact, as the world burns more fossil fuels. Canoes are clean, traffic less so, with pollution often in the air, which can mean in the water too. That's the environmental cost, not just at the toll bridge, but ultimately to the planet. But still quite good news for now anyway. But what will the children of tomorrow inherit? And why is their future relevant to a swan? One answer lies in the water, now a major concern to the highest level, including politicians, big business, bad behaviour and increasing public outrage. There have been threats of jail sentences for water-polluting executives on huge salaries and bonuses. Watch this space about doing or has done it. This perfect-looking swan is threatened by decisions made far from here, and often by innocent or well-meaning decision-makers. Also shoppers, us, in our millions. That connects with the land nearby, which can end up in a swan via its busy beak. But just look at the stuff it's feeding on. It's called blanket weed, and it's a killer, caused by runoff from the riverside. That should be riverside with a C, like homicide. Too true, perhaps. So what's going wrong for this beautiful, innocent bird? Over the old wooden toll bridge near Heron is a passing clue, a field to feed lorry, a reminder of that connection between the land and the river, the catchment, and what was one of the purest watercourses in Britain, the famously clean River Wye, but not anymore. This was the scene, white meadows of water crowfoot, a kind of floating buttercup, and supporting much wildlife, which in turn feeds our guide, the mallard drakes, here changing from their breeding plumage. As clouds of tiny flies skim the moving surface. The blanket weed suffocated the crowfoot, its flowers and the elegant stems in the flow of life. Yet more change. Take the harvest mouse, a seed eater, our smallest rodent, originally at home in rough vegetation, building its tennis ball shaped nests. Using its prehensile tail for climbing, it may have found it hard to climb out of trouble as farming changed the landscape almost everywhere. Small mammals are indicators of the health of nature. So are insects, very much so. Depending on the hidden flow below, this damselfly will spend most of its life under the surface as a larva, hatching out to become a skillful aerial predator, returning to its favourite vantage point to dissemble its prey. Air over the river is full of a kind of aerial plankton, and it's not only the damselfly on the hunt. The less active operator has a web that traps tiny victims which then escapes. No lunch for the spider this time then. A small snail is a grazer, perhaps the night shift. So just here is another web of life, delicate, perfected over millions of years, but now in our so-called civilized world, dependent on clean water like the River Wye used to be, a warning in the water. A male red damselfly with its amazing eyes, searching for a mate, and then a hectic chase begins. To and fro, round and round, looking for somewhere to lay her eggs. Try not to get tangled up in the nettle leaves, food plant of the red admiral butterfly, that colourful neighbour. They're looking for a good spot with waterweed near the surface. Twist and turn in tandem much better than any man-made helicopter. This takes some skill, Pretty good for an ancient insect descended over millions of years of evolution. What amazing precision. Here slowed down. When the larvae hatch, they'll hunt underwater, climb out and fly off within a year to complete the life cycle, the cycle of life. But only possible in unpolluted conditions. There are hundreds of damsel and dragonflies, brilliant flyers, through the vegetation along the river. Yellow flag iris are a common sight in the spring and summer, a great attraction to pollinators like bumblebees. And spotted by the unmistakable kingfisher, whose lifeline is down there, if he can catch it. He'll use several perches around his territory, but can only spend a certain waiting time before moving on to the next possible spot. Yet another use of wood. His preferred prey may also have a red breast, though if he's hungry, he'll consider all sorts of aquatic prey. But that in itself can be a hazard. It's not this, a grass snake, water-loving, but too much of a beak for him. He's looking for something easier. A water rail, a wetland specialist, seldom seen out in the open. A tadpole would do. But here comes trouble. More weed, but at least there's a stickleback rushing around. Possible prey. And a mayfly hatching, a sign of a cleaner bit of territory perhaps. Stickleback again, the main target. But more bad news, more weed. At last success, though not for the understandably nervous stickleback. Well, didn't he do well? Back down there, a red admiral, that nettle fan, drinks from what may or may not be polluted soil. That's connected as runoff with more diversity, like these caddisfly larvae that build cases of whatever comes in handy, like these twigs. Yet another link with plants. In this case, some shrimps appear to be in attendance, cleaning up the back end. And a ram's horn snail, is watched by a kingfisher who spotted another stickleback, a male, this one with the same colour breast as its own. He's attracted an unread female to his underwater nest, but not for long. Lunch for the kingfisher. One dies, so another may live. This much bigger fisherman watches, hidden, before moving on. None of this biodiversity would be possible without water, and nor would we. The plants we depend on, the wood we use, the other creatures that live with us, or at least try to. It can be stressful. But we sometimes try to make amends and protect the nature we depend on, and which also depends on us. Whether it's garden flowers, or hectic behaviour for such delicate insects. Or bumblebees that work so hard to pollinate them. That could be either in Wales or England, as the River Wye is shared by both countries along its course. Here at Hay-on-Wye, we can catch up with our tall fisherman, the heron, and meet its smaller version, a very successful relative, the little egret. Not always as successful as the human equivalent, but certainly in distribution terms, it's now colonised much of Europe, let alone England and Wales. His yellow feet help flush out fish, and he joins our guides, the ducks, in their search for food too. But what are they getting? Either off the stones or via the fish that we, and the egret, may eat too. That applies to the big heron as well. The fact is, what's in the water, on the stones and in the fish here is also in just about everything else. But we don't have enough good facts to make a case to save the Wye from deadly pollution. Many people are protesting and desperate to find a solution, or solutions. What would it or they be? Whodunnit is doing it, and can it be undone? We'll follow human progress, if any. It could turn out to be quite a challenge. But people will persevere and not go back in the fight to save the Wye, as we'll see. At one time it was said to be one of the most beautiful and cleanest rivers in Britain, potentially to be enjoyed by millions of people, and usually by dogs. But some can be quite fussy. Nice view, but what's the plan? How safe is all this? The tail is a clue. Yes, the view may be great, but have a look at what's down under there. Would they be safe to eat the fish they share with herons and egrets? We all need to know. Many of Britain's rivers are now polluted, and famously the River Thames in London, where salmon used to visit. Here herons are tame enough to be fed on bread, next to the splendid, appropriately looking mandarin drake from China. Perhaps sharing the Thames with a flip-flop, also perhaps from China. Now there are probably more mandarins in the wild in Britain than in their native home of China, from where they were introduced. They're now on the Wye and doing well. Here at Heron Wye, a mandarin family are going to get a bit of a surprise. Signs of protest as anti-pollution gathers momentum in the summer of 2022. But they do need those facts as soon as possible. Could the dry weather be a clue with lower than usual water levels, yet another result of the climate warming? This is one solution, in fact collected by citizen volunteers in transparent tubes for analysis. This may all look rather haphazard, but the publicity and the press will put across a strong message, spelt out next to the River Wye itself. All sorts of people, plus dogs, came to make an important point. SOS could be SOW, Save Our Wye.
Thank you.
Very good, they like that. People have come along to this renovated castle at Heron Wye to find out more about the river's catchment, its problems and how they might be solved. It's a big challenge. Hopefully the media will help publicise the situation, but the river will need a lot of help from its friends. And here's one of them.
With all the farmers that we can to try and do that. What we need really to achieve that is more money, of course. If any of you would like to join the Wildlife Trust, we'd really appreciate that. Our recruiter is at a stand over there. We've also got our wild play team who are offering some wildlife activities for the children amongst you, young and old.
On to the next suspect at a place in the catchment called Shobden. It may look innocent enough with its pretty houses, but change has been happening here. The classic lines of trees still lead these days to a fine church, but also to a temple of another faith and fortune, a force to be reckoned with, mass-produced chickens. More to come, much more. And we follow the trail, or rather the river, onto Whodunnit, with its little house and passing people, and dogs of course. Quite a surprise, carrying a sculpture by Philip Chatfield.
Rotate, come round so that she then, her back is facing the river.
Our Lady of the Waters,
The back to face the river.
the Virgin Mary. Perhaps Sir David's famous face will help.
We go this end down first.
The statue has already come downstream from Hay-on-Wye, stopping off along the way, meeting the local swans that are possibly eating poison water weeds from what's come off the fields. And our travelling guides, both flying and swimming, into the scene. More publicity for enthusiastic media. The fate of the ducks, and even us, is in her hands, and ours too. The launch. Follow those ducks. Next, plus heron the rapids. On now in midsummer to a serious threat to much of the British countryside and its rivers. It's about us. To put it bluntly, we excrete a lot of stuff, increasingly, as here at Ross-on-Wye. As well as, understandably, try to get on the housing ladder, there's more and more pressure to build more and more and more. There's been a lot of bad publicity about sewage being released into rivers and that way into the sea downstream. To reduce wrecking our crucial waterways, they have to find better methods of behaving in the future. But who's listening and doing anything about it? What changes can be made and where? The mown meadows amongst the original woodland are one way of shaping the landscape. Our heron leads us to a favourite tourist spot. Ducks fly in too. Ducks get used to this. The hand ferry between Symonds Yat West and Symonds Yat East. Dogs welcome. The tourist business is very important here, but only as long as people are able to enjoy a clean and healthy river that also provides for kingfishers, salmon, otters and much else that the public hopes to experience. And dogs may be disappointed when and if the boat business stops. What's the general verdict so far? Well, not too good. Microplastics have now been found in human breast milk, and when microplastics end up in the sea, filter feeding great whales eat 10 million micro pieces a day, a new study reports. Further on the journey down the Wye, it's purple loosestrife time for yet another brood of mallard ducklings. It's almost impossible for the mother to keep them all out of danger, but the species is so prolific that as a whole it's hardly endangered. Except for the increasing pollution that covers their home. It's on the stones and in the vegetation they rummage through. Our other guide, the heron, is here as well, at Monmouth, fishing amongst those slimy stones on which his prey, fish, may feed or try to. It's also where a black-backed gull comes for a clean-up. But how clean? He doesn't seem to trust the heron, who'll catch what it can. Using those wings, swans are allegedly able to break a human arm with them, and that's probably not true though. Our friends the ducks keep clear, but a dog is on the receiving end.
Wildlife, who these people are, scaring the hell out of those swans. That dog there. Yeah.
Good friends after all. Well, maybe. But are we good friends with nature? Some people locally are doing their best to help. As pollution of all sorts is poured into our rivers, lakes, shores and coasts, the anger is growing. More and more questions are being asked about who's doing it, indeed who done it.
Olivia, you have time going here. I'm just waiting.
For a swim pool.
To the swimming pool. Come on, the swimming pool.
So I can.
Well, supposedly, some people might be this afternoon meeting up here, but so many people can't meet. If anybody turns up, I'll send them in that direction.
Just copy the secretary. Against the graduate. Nice, yes.
Yes, no, but also the timing, the hours.
Yeah. I'm David
Can't allow extensions of toilets.
No, seriously. Heads it. Amazingly, this is saving the wife. Right? Saving the river.
What sort of rivers will she inherit? Could he save us from the dreaded blanket week? Here it comes. Save the dipper and its aquatic insect food, which it can get by walking underwater. SOS, save our salmon, means saving the Y. On downstream to Brockweir, where salmon used to pass in much bigger numbers than they do today. Now brimstone butterflies stock up at the last flower baskets of the season and may hibernate in the ivy later on. They're both a woodland and wetland species. And when the ivy flowers in late summer, other insects join in the feast, such as the ivy bee and many more. Red admirals, and speckled woods at the last sip saloon. Classic squirrel plus nut amongst the autumn leaves. What was that? Kingfishers may be hit if the water freezes, but squirrels have fur and a warm nest or dray. Our heron has arrived at a very different river scene. Here it poses a threat to the local mother duck and offspring. Just one left. And here the river appears to be flowing backwards. That's because the tide's coming in up from the Severn estuary a few miles downstream from here. Black-headed gulls use the wooden debris to and fro. A few hours later they'll be carried in the opposite direction when the tide turns again. Changes that may affect them are happening on the land too, as farming policy is nearly as fluid as the river, not apparently knowing where it's going. Whether it's cutting hay, clearing trees, spraying chemicals, farming's always in the spotlight, as they often struggle to earn a living and to feed us. Sometimes it's difficult to know which way to go, but the fact is it's the river and its condition that suffers. Their cattle can pose a particular problem, manure from one end, methane burped from the other. What goes in one end comes out the other and into the river. Farm buildings lie derelict, vets are expensive, and customers are worried about the cost of living, food and its availability, and especially what's in it. Why did this fine fish die? Riverside Cottage should perhaps be spelt with a C instead of an S, like homicide. How true is that these days? A last sign of summer, a black or rather brown-headed gull finds what he can from the to and fro tidal delivery service of the Wye. In winter he will lose that brown look, scanning the surface, which now looks pretty grim. As far as his eye can see. Time to move on, over the foam, to a better place, well, perhaps. But the ducks make the most of it. They're very versatile. Young herring gull doesn't give up pleading. Oh, wrong end, mate. The now less black-headed gull floats on the outgoing tide amongst the autumn leaves and past seed heads of the past summer. When the tide turns, he can float back on a passing log. A duckweed island of wood on the move. Wood is everywhere around the River Wye. Much of this stuff becomes part of the ecology, a kind of recycling process, which means putting our rubbish in the right place and not in our treasured waters. The autumn mist at this point near Tintern Abbey hides a duck, a real quacker, which is with the gulls and the heron heading downstream to a rather dramatic location. Chepstow Castle is next to a series of bridges that cross the Wye as its course approaches its end. On its 155 miles, 250 kilometres, the journey from the Welsh mountains of Plynlimmon, it has revealed or suggested the reasons for its sad state of change and pollution at the hands of humans. Certainly the increase in people pressure is a major factor, and with that comes roads, traffic and damaged air. More bridges, with the biggest ones in the distance. This is the end of the heron's flight. Salt marsh on a rising tide. He's come to the right place at the right time. And after a surprise, changed to slow motion, he heads for our other guides, the ducks, and has a go at one of them before ending his journey here at the end of the year. But who done it? All that stuff that has polluted the declining Y. Well, it turns out that's Poodunnit, chicken manure and more. About 20 million chickens are raised in the Y catchment area and more are proposed. According to the Times, those 20 million chickens are a quarter of the UK poultry population. Large corporations like Cargill and Avara pay farmers to raise chicks to slaughter weight in 6 to 8 weeks. And supermarkets, including Tesco, sell them for as little as £4.
So the most important thing, I think, is in the first place is to reduce the amount of phosphate coming into the catchment in the first place. So we've got it coming in artificial fertilisers, poultry manure. It comes into the poultry manure for either feed. We need to reduce that. The farmers are applying far too much, many of the farmers, far too much phosphate in their artificial fertilisers. The Refocus study shows that if they stopped applying phosphate, now there'd probably be 10 years of legacy phosphate in the soils.
So to sum up, it seems the main problem is the many chicken farms producing food for us as cheaply as possible at the cost of a beautiful river, and its innocent inhabitants trying to live alongside sewage that's dumped in the sea. Like bird flu and COVID, diseases can spread far, fast and wide and kill. And our heron and ducks have shown us the way. In a speech aged 21, the now King Charles, then Prince of Wales, the Wye is partly a Welsh river, speaking personally about population growth, sea and river pollution. He said, "Indestructible plastic containers, and it's not difficult to imagine the mountains of refuse that we shall have to deal with somehow." At the time he was regarded, as the King has reflected recently, as completely potty. Now this half a century ago speech seems visionary, potty being appropriate to his early warnings, as in Whodunnit. That's the wildlife detective story. With an intriguing twist for now and the future, for chickens and us. Soon it will be grown in a lab, and Upside Foods, for example, in the US, claim it is just like the real thing. The good news, no chickens are intensively reared, no poo is mass produced, and maybe, just maybe, the River Wye can be restored to its former beautiful glory. Maybe.